The Vorthak ship drifted silently through the void, its black hull reflecting no light from the distant stars. Inside the massive vessel, Commander Thexakar stood before a wall of flickering screens, each one showing the smoking remains of another. Conquered world. His 8-foot frame cast long shadows across the bridge as his multiple eyes scanned the destruction with cold satisfaction. "Bring up the Xerion system," he commanded, his voice a low growl that made lesser crew members flinch. The main display shifted to show what had once been a beautiful world of crystal spires and floating gardens. Now it was nothing but ash and debris orbiting a dying star. Lieutenant Vexmore approached with careful steps, his own chitinous armor clicking softly against the metal floor. "The harvest was successful, Commander. 12 million specimens processed. The crystalline beings put up minimal resistance once we eliminated their leadership." Thexkar's razor-sharp claws tapped against the console in a rhythm that had become habitual over centuries of conquest. Each tap represented another species. Catalogued, another civilization reduced to mere numbers in their vast database of the hunted. "They always break so easily," he mused, watching the final moments of Xerion's destruction play out on repeat. First, they try to fight with their primitive weapons. Then they attempt negotiation, as if we care about their pathetic pleas. Finally, comes the begging, the crying, the desperate offers of surrender. The bridge crew chittered with dark amusement. They had heard this speech before, but it never grew old. Each member of the Vorthak hunting syndicate lived for these moments of absolute dominance over lesser species. "The pattern never changes," continued Thexkar, his multiple eyes shifting to focus on different screens simultaneously. "Fear is universal. Every species in this galaxy shares the same weakness. They value their individual lives above all else. When we show them true predators, they crumble." Navigator Zeftal looked up from his station, where star charts displayed the locations of 400 conquered systems. Red markers indicated complete harvests, yellow showed ongoing operations, and green marked potential targets. The green markers were becoming increasingly rare as the Vorthak exhausted their hunting grounds. "So we may need to expand our search parameters," Zeftal reported. "The outer rim territories are showing fewer and fewer viable targets. Most species have either been harvested or have gone into deep hiding." Thexkar considered this with the patience of an apex predator. The Vorthak had built their entire civilization around the hunt. Their ships were weapons, their technology focused on tracking and killing, their culture centered on the sacred act of pursuing prey across the stars. Without the hunt, they were nothing. "Show me the frontier sectors," he ordered. The display shifted to show the galaxy's edge, where young stars nursed primitive worlds still developing life. Most were unsuitable, either too young to have evolved intelligence or too hostile to support the kind of complex civilizations the Vorthak preferred. "To hunt." "There," Zeftal pointed to a small section of space. "Grid 7 Alpha shows unusual promise. Yellow star stable system. Third planet shows signs of electromagnetic activity." The scanner data appeared on screen, showing radio waves pulsing from a small blue world. The signals were primitive but organized, suggesting a species that had discovered basic technology but remained unaware of the greater galaxy around them. "Electromagnetic signatures indicate they have developed communication networks," reported the science officer. "Satellite technology, broadcast signals, but no evidence of faster-than-light capability or defensive systems." Thexkar leaned forward, his predatory instinct stirring. A species advanced enough to be challenging but primitive enough to be helpless, exactly what the syndicate needed. "Population estimates?" he asked. "Approximately 7 billion individuals. Based on energy consumption patterns, they appear to be concentrated in specific regions of their single continental landmass." 7 billion. The number sent a thrill through the bridge crew. Most of their recent hunts had yielded populations in the millions. This world promised sport that could last for years, maybe decades if they managed it properly. "Preliminary analysis suggests a standard sapient species," continued the science officer. "They show the typical signs: territorial disputes, resource competition, but no evidence of the kind of unity that might pose a threat to our operations." Thexkar studied the data with growing excitement. The electromagnetic signatures showed a species busy with their own petty conflicts, completely unaware that death watched them from the stars. They had no idea that their radio signals were like beacon fires, drawing the most dangerous predators in the galaxy directly to their doorstep. "Mark it for immediate deployment," he commanded. "Prepare 3 hunting packs. We will approach from their outer system and begin with standard intimidation protocols." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, already anticipating the familiar rhythm of a new hunt. Ships would be prepared, weapons checked, tracking equipment calibrated. Soon they would descend upon this unsuspecting world and begin the process that had worked flawlessly for 3 millennia. "Commander," Vexmore asked, "shall we follow standard protocol for primitive species?" "Of course," Thexkar replied, his claws clicking with anticipation. "Land in remote areas, select isolated groups for initial contact. Let them see what true predators look like. Once word spreads and panic sets in, we can begin the proper harvest." The blue world rotated slowly on their screens, peaceful and unaware. The morning air in the Korean mountains was crisp and clean as Park Jin-ho adjusted his backpack and checked his watch. As a hiking guide, he had walked these trails around Seoraksan National Park hundreds of times, but he never tired of the view. The mist clung to the peaks like ghostly fingers, and the autumn leaves painted the mountainsides in brilliant reds and golds. "Stay together, everyone," he called out to his small group of city dwellers who had paid good money for a weekend escape from Seoul's concrete jungle. "The trail gets narrow up ahead, and cell phone coverage disappears completely once we reach the ridge." Kim Minji, a surgeon who worked brutal 12-hour shifts at Seoul National University Hospital, breathed in the mountain air gratefully. "This is exactly what I needed," she said, shouldering her designer hiking pack that probably cost more than most people made in a month. No beeping machines, no emergency calls, just peace and quiet. Lee Dong-hyun fumbled with his expensive camera equipment, trying to capture the perfect shot of morning light filtering through the pine trees. The software engineer had spent more time indoors than most people spend sleeping, and his pale complexion showed it. "The lighting up here is incredible," he muttered, adjusting settings he barely understood. Jin-ho smiled at their enthusiasm, but kept his trained eyes scanning the terrain. 20 years in the Republic of Korea Marine Corps had taught him that trouble could come from anywhere, even in peaceful places like this. Old habits died hard, and something about this morning felt different. The forest was too quiet. No bird songs, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. They had been hiking for about 2 hours when Jin-ho held up his hand, signaling the group to stop. His military instincts were screaming warnings, but he couldn't identify the source of his unease. The trees seemed to lean in closer, and the shadows felt deeper than they should have been. "What is it?" Minji asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. "Probably nothing," Jin-ho replied, but his hand instinctively moved to his belt where he kept a tactical knife. "Just thought I heard something unusual." That's when the attack came. The creature exploded from the tree line like nightmare-made flesh. 8 feet of pure killing machine, covered in natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. Multiple eyes burned with alien intelligence and predatory hunger, while claws long, then kitchen knives extended from hands designed for nothing but death. Dong-hyun screamed and dropped his camera, the expensive equipment shattering on the rocky trail. Minji froze completely, her medical training useless against something that defied every law of biology she knew. But Jin-ho moved. 20 years of combat training kicked in before conscious thought could interfere. His body reacted with muscle memory built through countless hours of drill and 3 tours of duty in places where hesitation meant death. He shoved Minji behind the nearest boulder with one hand while grabbing a fallen tree branch with the other. The Vorthak hunter had expected cowering prey. It had hunted across 400 star systems and never encountered a species that didn't immediately break into panic and flight. Its predatory brain calculated attack vectors and killing strikes while savoring the familiar taste of fear that should have been flooding the area. Instead, it found something completely unexpected. Jin-ho's eyes took in the creature's anatomy with tactical precision. Natural armor meant conventional attacks would be useless, but those multiple eyes suggested vulnerable points. The way it moved indicated balance issues, too top-heavy, probably overconfident from millennia of easy kills. "You want to dance?" Jinho muttered in Korean, hefting the makeshift spear. "Let's dance." The alien lunged with speed that would have overwhelmed any normal prey, but Jinho had faced insurgents with automatic weapons and lived to tell about it. He feinted left, rolled right, and drove the sharpened branch directly into the cluster of primary eyes with surgical precision. The sound the creature made was unlike anything heard in 1,000 years of Vorthak history. Black blood sprayed across the mountain rocks as the apex predator experienced something it had never known, genuine pain and the possibility of death. But this hunter wasn't alone. 2 more Vorthak emerged from concealment, their tactical minds already adjusting to the unexpected resistance. They had planned to terrorize these primitive beings into submission, but now they faced something that fought back with deadly efficiency. Minji overcame her shock just as the second creature targeted her hiding spot. Her surgeon's hands found a sharp rock, and muscle memory from her mandatory military service kicked in. She might work in an operating room now, but every Korean citizen learned basic combat skills, and she had been surprisingly good at it. The rock caught the alien in what appeared to be a breathing apparatus, and toxic-looking fluid began leaking from the wound. The creature staggered, giving Donghyun enough time to swing his heavy camera tripod like a club, connecting with the thing's leg joint and sending it crashing down the mountainside. By the time the sun reached its peak, 3 Vorthak hunters lay dead among the autumn leaves, their black blood seeping into Korean soil. The surviving members of their pack fled back to their ships, carrying with them something the Vorthak syndicate had never experienced, the knowledge that they could be killed by their intended prey. That night, government scientists worked under floodlights to examine the alien corpses, while military analysts tried to understand what they were dealing with. But the most important lesson had already been learned in those few minutes of desperate combat among the mountain peaks. The galaxy's apex predators had just discovered that Earth's children knew how to fight back. Colonel Choi Sunwoo stared at the alien corpse through 6 inches of reinforced glass, his weathered face showing no emotion. 23 years of special operations had shown him many things that would give ordinary people nightmares. But this was something entirely different. The creature on the examination table was built for one purpose only: killing other intelligent beings. "How did 3 hiking civilians manage to take down something like this?" asked Dr. Yoon Haeun, adjusting her laboratory coat as she pointed to the creature's natural armor plating. "Look at this chitinous shell. Our preliminary tests show it can deflect small-caliber rounds." Sunwoo walked slowly around the examination room, his tactical mind cataloging every detail of the alien hunter. Retractable claws that could slice through steel, multiple redundant organs that would keep it fighting even after sustaining massive damage, and sensory apparatus designed to track prey across vast distances. "They made a critical error," he replied quietly. "They assumed that because we're not spacefaring, we don't know how to kill efficiently." Within hours of the mountain incident, South Korea's most elite units had been activated. The government couldn't risk panic by revealing the full extent of the alien threat, but they could quietly mobilize their finest soldiers to deal with what appeared to be an ongoing invasion. Captain Nam Taeyang crouched in the pre-dawn darkness along the demilitarized zone, where satellite imagery had detected more of the alien craft. His team of 8 operators had trained together for 6 years, perfecting the art of silent elimination. They were ghosts who could move through enemy territory without leaving so much as a footprint. "Contact, 200 meters northwest," whispered Sergeant Oh Kyung-min through the tactical radio. His sniper scope had picked up the distinctive heat signature of a Vorthak scout moving through the abandoned buildings of the DMZ. These aliens had chosen their hunting ground poorly. The DMZ was a place where South Korean special forces trained constantly, a no-man's land filled with sensors, traps, and soldiers who had spent their entire careers preparing for invisible enemies. "I have visual on the target," Kyung-min continued. "It's moving like it owns the place. No tactical awareness whatsoever." Taeyang smiled grimly. The creature was behaving exactly like an apex predator that had never encountered serious resistance. It moved in straight lines, made no attempt at concealment and seemed completely unaware that it had entered the territory of beings who had perfected the art of warfare. "Take the shot," Taeyang commanded. The suppressed rifle made barely a whisper. As the bullet found its target, the Vorthak's head exploded in a spray of black blood, and the 8-foot killing machine dropped like a sack of meat. It had died without ever knowing humans were in the area. "Target down," Kyung-min reported, moving to secondary position, but the real test came when they encountered a full Vorthak hunting pack 30 minutes later. 3 of the creatures had cornered what they thought was easy prey, a maintenance worker who had been repairing communications equipment near the border. The aliens had expected terror and submission. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by invisible enemies who struck from the shadows with surgical precision. Corporal Han Woo-jin emerged from concealment behind the first Vorthak, his combat knife finding the gap between armor plates that Dr. Yoon had identified during her examination. The creature managed half a roar before the blade severed whatever passed for its spinal cord. The second alien spun to face this new threat, but Private Kim Seung-ho was already moving. His approach was textbook, low, fast, and utterly silent. The shaped charge he placed against the creature's leg joint detonated with a muffled thump, sending the alien crashing to the ground, where Lee Min-hyuk finished it with a precise rifle shot. The third Vorthak managed to send a distress signal before Taeyang's team eliminated it, but the message that reached the alien ship was not what the commanders expected to hear. "Impossible," snarled Hunt Leader Vexkar as he listened to the final transmission. "The prey species is hunting us." High above Earth's atmosphere, the Vorthak fleet watched in growing confusion as their ground teams disappeared one by one. These weren't random casualties, they were systematic eliminations carried out with military precision. "Commander," reported the tactical officer, "we've lost contact with 7 hunting packs in the past 12 hours. The last transmissions indicate coordinated resistance from multiple positions." Commander Thexkar studied the tactical display with growing unease. Red marks indicated lost hunting parties, while yellow marks showed teams that had gone silent. The pattern was unmistakable. The humans were not just fighting back, they were winning. "This is impossible," he growled. "No prey species has ever adapted this quickly." But the evidence was undeniable. Somewhere below, the creatures they had intended to hunt were proving to be far more dangerous than anticipated. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were actively hunting the hunters. Back on Earth, Taeyang's team processed the alien equipment they had recovered. The technology was advanced but not incomprehensible. Korean engineers were already working to reverse engineer the communication devices and weapons systems. "Sir," called communications specialist Park Ji-won, "we've managed to decrypt part of their tactical frequency. They're calling for reinforcements." Taeyang nodded. Grimly, this was just the beginning. But as he looked at his team of professional soldiers, men who had spent their lives training to fight enemies they couldn't see, he felt something the Vorthak had never encountered in 3,000 years of hunting. He felt confident that the hunters were about to become the hunted. High Commander Morthak stood in the center of the Vorthak flagship's command bridge, his multiple eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed something impossible. 23 hunting parties had been deployed to the Blue World. 23 had gone silent. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. "Show me the final transmission from Hunt Leader Kexvor," he commanded, his voice barely containing the rage that threatened to consume his carefully maintained composure. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the desperate final moments of one of their most experienced hunters. The image was chaotic, filled with the sounds of weapons fire and shouting in the primitive language of the prey species. But what chilled Morthak to his core was what he could see in the background. The humans moved like a coordinated killing machine. Their faces were painted with mud and strange patterns, making them blend into their environment like natural predators. They communicated through hand signals and moved with the kind of tactical precision that took centuries to develop. These weren't terrified prey animals running in panic. These were organized hunters working together to eliminate a threat. "They coordinate like our own war packs," whispered war leader Zektal, his claws clicking nervously against his armor. But they're not hunting for territory or resources. They're hunting us because we threatened them. The transmission showed a human soldier, young barely past adolescence by Vorthak standards, methodically placing some kind of explosive device while his companions provided covering fire. The boy's movements were calm, professional, deadly. He could have been performing routine maintenance for all the emotion he showed. "Replay section 79 Alpha," Vorthak ordered. The hologram focused on a moment when the human soldiers paused their attack. One of them was speaking into a communication device, his voice clear and controlled despite the chaos around him. The universal translator struggled with the alien language, but the meaning was unmistakable. "Command, this is Bravo Team. Hostile eliminated. Moving to extract intel from the corpse. Request immediate pickup for captured technology." Captured technology. The word sent a chill through every Vorthak on the bridge. These primitive beings weren't just killing their hunters. They were studying them, learning from them, adapting their tactics based on what they discovered. Intelligence Officer Nixtal approached with trembling appendages, carrying a data pad, filled with intercepted communications from the planet below. "Commander, you need to see this. We've been monitoring their electromagnetic transmissions, and what we've found is disturbing." The main display shifted to show a compilation of human broadcasts, news reports, military communications, historical documentaries. The images that appeared made even hardened Vorthak warriors step back in shock. Massive armies stretching across continents, weapons that could level entire cities in seconds, wars that had consumed entire generations, with casualty counts that exceeded the total population of most worlds the Vorthak had conquered. This species has been fighting wars against itself for their entire recorded history, Nixtal reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. "They've developed thousands of different ways to kill their own kind. They've turned warfare into a science." The display showed human soldiers from different time periods, warriors with primitive weapons who fought with desperate courage, modern armies with technology that rivaled some spacefaring civilizations, special forces units that could eliminate targets without being detected. "Look at this," Nixtal continued, highlighting a section of intercepted military training footage. "They practice killing scenarios constantly. They run simulations of conflicts that haven't even happened yet. They train their young to fight before they're fully grown." Vorthak watched human children, barely old enough to walk properly, learning to march in formation, to follow orders, to think tactically. This wasn't a peaceful species that had been forced into conflict. This was a world of natural-born warriors who had spent millennia perfecting the art of organized violence. Their history shows over 14,000 documented wars in the past 5,000 years, the intelligence officer continued. "They've never had a generation that didn't know conflict. They've never had peace across their entire world for more than a few decades at a time." The tactical display shifted to show population density maps and resource distribution patterns. Unlike most civilized worlds, where beings lived in harmony and shared resources equitably, this planet showed the clear signs of competitive evolution. Hundreds of separate groups, each controlling territory, each maintaining military forces, each prepared to fight at a moment's notice. "They don't just fight," war leader Zektal observed with growing horror. "They enjoy it. Look at their entertainment. Stories about warriors, games that simulate combat, competitions where they fight for sport." The hologram showed human entertainment, movies about soldiers and battles, video games where players controlled armies, sporting events where physical conflict was celebrated and cheered. This species didn't just tolerate violence, they embraced it as part of their culture. "Commander," Nixtal said quietly, "there's something else. We've detected unusual activity in their industrial sectors. They're manufacturing something, and the electromagnetic signatures match our weapon systems. The implications hit the bridge like a physical blow." In less than one standard galactic cycle, these humans had reverse-engineered Vorthak technology and were already producing their own versions. What had taken the Vorthak centuries to develop, the humans had mastered in weeks. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It's directed at us specifically." "Impossible," Vorthak snarled. "They don't have interstellar communication capability." "They do now, sir. They're using our own communication frequencies. 18 months had passed since the first Vorthak scout ships had entered Earth's solar system with dreams of easy prey. Now, Admiral Lee Ji-won stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship Soul's Vengeance, watching through the massive viewports as her fleet emerged from hyperspace above the Vorthak homeworld. The ships that surrounded her bore little resemblance to Earth's primitive spacecraft from just 2 years ago. Sleek, deadly vessels built from a combination of reverse-engineered alien technology and human innovation floated in perfect formation. Each ship represented months of round-the-clock work by Earth's finest engineers, who had taken Vorthak designs and improved them in ways their original creators never imagined. "Ma'am," reported Captain Yu Jinwoo from the tactical station, "we're detecting massive defensive installations around their primary world. Looks like they've been preparing for our arrival." Ji-won smiled grimly as she studied the readouts. Orbital. Weapon platforms, energy shields, fighter squadrons, everything the Vorthak had used to terrorize other species for 3 millennia. But there was something different about their formations, something that suggested fear rather than confidence. "They're clustering their defenses," observed Commander Park Soyeon, the fleet's tactical analyst. "Classic defensive posture. They're not planning to attack. They're trying to protect themselves." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The galaxy's apex predators, who had spent centuries hunting other species across the stars, were now cowering behind shields and weapons, hoping to keep humanity at bay. "Open a channel to their command center," Ji-won ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Vorthak flagship. High Commander Morthak appeared smaller somehow, his once proud posture bent with the weight of defeat. Around him, the greatest hunters in galactic history moved with the nervous energy of prey animals, sensing a predator nearby. "Admiral Lee," Morthak's voice carried a tone no Vorthak had ever used before, respect mixed with barely controlled terror. We are prepared to negotiate terms." Ji-won studied the alien commander with the same cold assessment her ancestors had used when evaluating enemy positions during Korea's long history of defensive wars. Her people had learned centuries ago that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary. "You came to our world as hunters," she stated simply, her voice carrying across space with absolute authority. "You intended to terrorize and consume my people. You believed we would cower and submit like the hundreds of species you've destroyed." Behind her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. These weren't the panicked civilians the Vorthak had expected to find 18 months ago. These were professional military personnel from a species that had never known a generation without war, who had turned conflict into both art and science. "We made an error," Morthak admitted, his multiple eyes unable to meet the human admiral's steady gaze. "We underestimated your capabilities. You thought we were prey," Ji-won interrupted. "But you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed that because we hadn't developed space travel on our own, we were primitive. You failed to understand that we've spent our entire existence as a species learning to fight." The tactical display beside her showed the deployment of human forces throughout former Vorthak territory. In less than 2 years, Earth's children had not only mastered interstellar travel, but had systematically dismantled the infrastructure of fear that had held the galaxy hostage for millennia. "Your hunting grounds are now patrol routes," Ji-won continued, gesturing to the display. "The species you terrorized are under our protection. The ships you built for hunting now serve as early warning systems for our defense networks." In the detention levels below, former war leader Kextal pressed his face against the reinforced window of his cell, watching human vessels move through space with the coordinated precision of a wolf pack. These ships didn't just travel from point to point. They prowled, they patrolled, they stood ready to respond to threats that might emerge from the darkness between stars. But what truly amazed him was what they chose not to do. The humans could have exterminated every Vorthak in the galaxy. Their technology had surpassed his people's capabilities within months. Their tactical thinking had proven superior in every engagement, and their capacity for organized violence exceeded anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead, they had chosen to become protectors. The Zarian survivors have been relocated to a new world, reported Lieutenant Kim Daeho from the communications station. The crystal beings are already beginning to rebuild their civilization under our protection. Excellent, Ji-won replied. And the Zephyrian refugees, settled on 3 worlds in the Outer Rim territories. Our engineering corps has helped them establish defensive installations to prevent future attacks. Morthak listened to these reports with growing confusion. The humans weren't conquering the galaxy, they were healing it. Species that the Vorthak had driven to the edge of extinction were being given new homes, new hope, new protection from the predators that had haunted their nightmares. I don't understand, he said finally. You have the power to rule this galaxy. You've proven yourselves the ultimate apex predators. Why do you protect the weak instead of consuming them? Ji-won turned to face the alien commander fully, and in her eyes he saw something that chilled him more than any weapon ever could, the calm certainty of a predator who had evolved beyond the need to prove its dominance through violence. Because, she said quietly, true apex predators protect the pack. We learned long ago that the strongest species isn't the one that can kill the most. It's the one that chooses when to kill and when to defend. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. The most dangerous hunters weren't those with the sharpest claws or the strongest armor. They were the ones who understood that ultimate power meant having the wisdom to use it properly, and humanity had made their choice.